Tomorrow is Remembrance Day, and today the Greater Essex County District School Board in Ontario has circulated an email to the 75 schools it runs in places like Windsor and Leamington to the 4,500 staff and 34,000 students over which it presides. They circulated an email saying that the public schools that they run with taxpayers' dollars should be prepared to exempt students from Remembrance Day. Here, let me quote the memo. Some schools may have their own school assemblies, while others may choose to participate in the ceremonies of their local municipalities, such as the Windsor Cenotaph. Okay, so far so good. But the next sentences are the key parts. Please be mindful that some families may be reluctant to have their children attend your location municipality's ceremonies. Please note that meaningful alternate activities should be provided at the schools for those families who do not wish their children to participate in any Remembrance Day ceremonies. And in case you're wondering who they might be referring to, in cities like Windsor, where the schools are about 10% Muslim, they gave a pretty strong hint. They gave some suggestions for other ways of celebrating Remembrance Day, including reading this story about the first Muslim soldier in the Canadian Forces who wore a hijab, the Muslim head covering, and another Islamic story too. The school is instructing its teachers that some students do not have to participate in Remembrance Day. Is it a coincidence that they included links to stories about Muslims in the Canadian Forces? There are at least 5 things wrong with this. The first is, this is Canada. Remembrance Day is part of our country. It remembers our history and the men and women who fought and died to keep us free. That is who we are. It is not a dark day, an embarrassing day, a racist day, a day of shame. It is a day of remembering who we are and why we are free and what we stand for and who sacrificed to make us this way. Exempting a student from participating in a civic activity in school has no justification. It's not like a religious day like Christmas. It's a day about all Canadians. It's a disgrace that any family would object to participating in it, especially an immigrant family who came here to benefit from our country. And if they're a Muslim immigrant, as most Muslims in Canada are, odds are they came here from a hellhole like Pakistan or Egypt or Iran. So for an immigrant family to object to our Remembrance Day is unacceptable, just as unacceptable as if they refused to be loyal citizens, and as if they rejected our country's sovereignty. In fact, it would call into question the basis on which they applied for and were granted citizenship. It's an act of disloyalty, pure and simple. That's what schools are for, I guess, to teach our culture and our history and to build community relationships, especially the public schools, bought and paid for with tax dollars. So if there's some recalcitrant family who puts Muslim supremacy ahead of Canadian citizenship, well, that's where the school would come in, right? To teach the Canadian way, to teach about Flanders Fields and Vimy Ridge and Dieppe and peacekeeping. That's what the schools are for. And even if some 60 or 70-year-old bigot for some backwoods village in Pakistan or Somalia doesn't want to respect Canada and Remembrance Day and doesn't believe in Canadian sovereignty and prefers Sharia law, well, that's where our Canadian public schools come in and teach those bigots, kids and grandkids, what it really means to be Canadian. It's where we side with Canada and help immigrant children become Canadian too. It's like with Aksa Parvez and her father. Aksa Parvez loved being Canadian. She loved dressing like a normal Canadian teenager without wearing a Muslim veil over her face. Her father disagreed and was so furious with her, he murdered her. Respecting Remembrance Day isn't as important as respecting the very life of your own daughter and not killing her, but it's along the same continuum, and that continuum has 2 poles on it. Do you live like you're in some medieval town in Pakistan or Egypt or Iran or Somalia? Or do you live like you're an immigrant to the best country in the world that just gave you the winning ticket in the lottery of life and let you come here, guaranteeing a better future for your children than they would have ever had back home? And all we ask in return is that you be Canadian. It's a pretty simple choice. Be Canadian or don't come here in the first place. So the first outrage is that some Muslim parents would object to this most Canadian of days. The second outrage is that the public school system would abide this. The third outrage is the belief by either Muslim parents or the morons at the school board that Remembrance Day is in any way anti-Muslim. Canada fought in the Boer War against the Afrikaners. We fought in the First World War against the Germans, the Second World War against Germany and Italy and Japan. We fought against North Korea. What on earth could possibly be objectionable to a Muslim family about any of that? Can you imagine if a German or Japanese family in Canada objected to Remembrance Day? The first and obvious question would be, what? Do you think the Nazis or Emperor Hirohito was right? Do you think we should have lost those wars? It's unthinkable that a German or Japanese Canadian family would say that, because German Canadians and Japanese Canadians are Canadians first and foremost. If they actually objected to our winning those wars 70 years ago, they probably wouldn't have been living here for the last 3 generations. Can you imagine the reaction if someone said they weren't going to attend Remembrance Day because we were wrong to have fought Hitler? But that's the implication of Muslim families objecting to Remembrance Day, that we were wrong. Or maybe it's that we are wrong today, because if you look at all the recent wars and military missions Canada has done, it's all been in Muslim lands. Fighting to protect Muslims in the Kosovo War, fighting to protect Muslims in Kuwait, who were invaded by Saddam Hussein, fighting to protect Muslims in Afghanistan, especially Muslim girls who weren't even allowed to go to school, fighting to liberate Muslims in Libya from Muammar Gaddafi, fighting to stop the Islamic State terrorists in Syria and Iraq from butchering everyone around them. 158 Canadians died trying to liberate that hellhole of Afghanistan from Sharia law thugs called the Taliban. If I were a Muslim immigrant, I would be amazed that a country like Canada, where not 1 in 100 people could find Afghanistan on a map, with no trade ties to Afghanistan, no national interest at play, that such a country would give 158 lives and tens of billions of dollars to help liberate a Muslim country for no reason other than to help improve the lives of its 99% Muslim population. And if I were from Syria or Iraq, I'd think the same about our mission against the Islamic State terrorists now. If I were part of a Muslim immigrant family, I would sing "O Canada" extra loud. I wouldn't just wear a poppy, I'd be out on the streets selling them. I would be thanking Allah that such a generous and open and loving and giving country such as Canada not only tried to fix their failed countries, but has let in close to 1 million Muslim immigrants, including about 500,000 since 9/11. That's what I'd be doing if I were a parent in the Greater Essex County District School Board. And then there is what happened just last month, the Muslim terrorist murder of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent in Quebec, the Muslim terrorist murder of Corporal Nathan Cirillo in Ottawa. I would be aware of the shameful acts of Muslim extremists and how they do their violence in the name of Islam. Those terrorists say it's because of Islam. Most Muslim terrorist groups have the word Islam right in their name, like the Islamic State terrorist group does. So if I were a Muslim family in the Greater Essex County District School Board, I would be very conscious of all this and furious about and embarrassed about the fact that these terrorists were doing so in the name of Islam. And I would take great pains to prove that those violent Muslim extremists were a fringe, did not speak for the greater Muslim community. I would sing extra loud when "O Canada" was sung. I would wear a little maple leaf lapel all the time. If I wore a hijab, I'd make one out of the maple leaf fabric. That's what I'd do. I'd do everything to prove that the Muslim community did not support those terrorists and that the Muslim community in Canada denounces them without adding the word "but" at the end of the denunciation. Instead, mere weeks after those shocking murders, including the shooting spree within our parliament itself, we have Muslim separatists who do not want to participate in Remembrance Day. That's what they are, separatists. They want to separate from us, mere Canadians, infidels, the kuffars. And the Greater Essex County District School Board will abide this and cooperate with it and formalize it and normalize it? Have we no self-respect? And the answer is no, we do not. 2 years ago, in this picture that surfaced from a large public school in the Toronto area called Valley Park Middle School. It's a school cafeteria in the middle of the day, but as you can see, it was turned into a mosque. A taxpayer-funded public school was turned into a mosque run by a Muslim imam. As you can see, it was gender segregated, apartheid style. Boys at the front, then girls in the middle, and then get this, girls at the far back who were having their period. Can you believe that? That gender apartheid? That a gross old male imam would actually sort the children like that, not just by sex, but inquiring with the girls if they were having their period and then shaming them by sending them to the far back of the cafeteria in a public school paid for by taxpayers, all approved by, in this case, the largest public school board in Canada, that of Toronto. You know, I've said it before. I said it on the day when that Muslim terrorist shot up our parliament. I said, we have to screen immigrants from terrorist-infested countries. We have to ask them simple questions that they aren't being asked now, like, Do you believe in the equality of men and women? Do you believe in nonviolence? Do you believe in liberal democracy? Do you believe that all religions are equal before the law? Maybe even, do you love Canada? And we have to enforce our laws and our values and fight those who aren't. Even if, there are mosques that are inciting violence, they need to be treated no differently than a Hell's Angel clubhouse where violent plans are being concocted. That's what I said last month after we were attacked. But what do you do when it's not a radical mosque that wants to destroy Remembrance Day, that's ashamed of Remembrance Day? What do you do when it's not a foreign terrorist group or a foreign values mosque that says that? What do you do when it's your own Canadian taxpayer-funded public school board that says this? More than 100,000 Canadians have given their lives in our wars. 158 Canadian forces gave their lives in Afghanistan. Last month, Nathan Cirillo and Patrice Vincent gave their lives too. The politically correct, self-hating cowards at the Greater Essex County District School Board do not deserve the freedom that those great Canadians gave their lives to protect. We contacted the school board to ask them to explain themselves. They wouldn't admit the email was specifically about Muslims. Scott Scantlebury, their PR officer, told us that it was about religious accommodation, as if Remembrance Day was a religious event like Christmas, as if being Muslim naturally meant you don't support Canada. Oh, and this is classic. He said that such exemptions are, quote, usually requested by members of faiths in which pacifism is a tenet. Oh, really? Like the Amish, maybe? If that were true, why were the only two websites mentioned in this disloyal email? Why were they Muslim websites about Muslims in the Canadian forces? Islam is not a pacific religion. Islam is quite a warlike religion. Scott Scantlebury isn't defending his school board's policy. He's misrepresenting his school board's policy because he was caught. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of disloyal Canadians who take everything we have and give nothing in return. I'm sick of people who come to Canada and bring violence or illiberal values like beating women and honor killings and terrorism. And I'm even more sick of mushy white bureaucrats making excuses for it. I'm not sure what I can do other than express my disgust, but maybe a petition to show these folks how un-Canadian they are. I'm talking about the school board. I've set up a website called lovitorleave.ca. It's very simple. It has a petition on it that we're going to send to the Greater Essex County District School Board to tell them to screw their heads in straight. The petition is at the website, lovitorleave.ca. Because if you don't love Canada, why the hell don't you go somewhere else that suits your tastes and values a bit better? Lovitorleave.ca. Here's the petition. It's very simple. We, the undersigned, demand that the Greater Essex County District School Board require all students, regardless of their background, to attend Remembrance Day ceremonies. Plain and simple. Sign it and we'll forward the petition to the school board. And if you want to show your pride tomorrow, wear a poppy. And you know what? I've got a couple of t-shirts you can wear too. T-shirts that send a bloody clear message. Here's a shirt, Canada, love it or leave. And here's another one with our war memorial on it. These colors don't run. I am so furious that the very people who are supposed to be defending our country's history and teaching our country's values are the ones selling us out. I don't know if this petition will accomplish anything, but it will tell the school board their cowardice is unacceptable. It's un-Canadian.